Liberals love to suck up to big oligopolistic corporations that raise prices on consumers and make life less affordable. They get lots of support from the NDP for this corporatist agenda. And lately, they've been on a real ride. Today, they announced that they think that there's too much competition in the wireless and in the internet business, and they've allowed for a massive merger. When will they start standing up for consumers instead of standing up for price-raising and high-cost corporate oligarchs?
The Honourable Minister for Science, Innovation and Industry.
Madam Speaker, we will take no lessons from these conservatives and from this leader, that's for sure. Madam Speaker, we listen to Canadians, and I think they should do that a bit more often. Canadians have told us one thing: they want lower prices. The way to have lower prices, Madam Speaker, is through competition. The way to have more competition is to have a strong fourth national player that will bring prices down. That's why, Madam Speaker, the transfer of license will go forward with 21 conditions. They have made a contract with Canadians which is enforceable and with penalties. That's what Canadians want. They want lower prices.
Madam Speaker, Canadians pay the highest cell phone prices in the world. In fact, Rogers Telecommunications is the most expensive telecommunication carrier in the whole of the world. How expensive? 3 times as expensive as Australia, twice as expensive as the US and Europe. The Rogers-Shaw deal will only make the priciest company and the most biggest only bigger. We need more competition in Canada, which means not just a 4th carrier, but 40 carriers to supply more choice to Canadians and lower prices. When will this minister get serious about competition instead of pandering to just one monopoly?
The Honourable Minister of Science, Innovation and Industry.
Madam Speaker, I'm very pleased for the question of my colleague. Perhaps he did not fully listen to the press conference this morning, because in fact, if he looks at the contract, the prices that you see in Quebec, which are on average 20% lower than in the rest of Canada, now will have to be offered in Ontario, in Manitoba, in British Columbia, in Alberta. In Western Canada, Madam Speaker, in addition to that, we got commitments to have a headquarter in Alberta, in Calgary, and 3,000 new jobs in Western Canada. Canadians know that we have their back, and Western Canadians understand that.
The Honourable Member for South Shore, for South Shore St. Margaret's.
In fact, Videotron's prices are higher than Freedom. So if Liberals really believed in competition, they would have let a competitive bidding process happen for Freedom. These Liberals are in the back pocket of Rogers. They allowed Rogers to ignore 3 higher bidders for Freedom. These Liberals and PMO were lobbied more than 60 times by Videotron and Rogers during the sale process, but did not meet once with any other bidder. Why did Rogers get privileged access to these Liberals that other bidders did not?
Honourable Minister for Innovation, Science and Industry.
Madam Speaker, I have enormous respect for my colleague and my critic, but one thing you would know as the regulator, you don't meet with the parties, Madam Speaker. That's a basic principle in due process. You don't meet with the parties, Madam Speaker. But what Canadians understood this morning, and particularly Western Canadians, is that we have their back, Madam Speaker, because what they want is to have lower prices. The way to do that is to have competition, and the way to do that is for a 4th national player. For members on the other side who may not have a chance, read the contracts with Canadian. That's the way that you bring lower prices in Canada.
The Honourable Member for South Shore St. Margaret's.
Minister, all he needs to check the lobbyist registry to see more than 65 meetings with his department and PMO. In December, this Liberal minister said he would not rule on the sale until the legal challenges were over. There is a legal challenge before the CRTC currently on this deal, when Rogers providing preferential rates to Videotron for access to their network that no other cell phone provider can get. Why has this minister flip-flopped on his commitment to wait for the legal challenges to be over? Is it because Rogers set today as the deadline?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I'm so happy that my colleagues asked questions, by the way. I look forward to more questions, because one thing that people at home understand is that we're fighting at every step of the way to bring prices lower in Canada, Madam Speaker. What we have achieved today is a new chapter in telecom in Canada. For the first time in Canada's history, more than 150 years, you have binding legal commitments by the telco in a contract with Canadians to bring prices lower in Canada, Madam Speaker. And this is this government who did that. Canadians know we have their back. We'll fight for them at every step of the way.
Honorable député de Montmorency, Lillet, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup.
Madame la Présidente, aujourd'hui, le ministre...
Madam Speaker, today the Minister of Innovation and Industry announced the merger between Rogers and Shaw in telecommunications. And Videotron, another company involved, has to lower its prices in Quebec, but has imposed no other conditions in other businesses involved in this transaction. Why? The Honourable Minister. I thank my colleague for his question. It's relatively simple. When one's the regulator and there's two parties, that's where you can get commitments from Videotron and Rogers. But Canadians understand that if we have pressure on prices with Videotron in Western Canada, it will lead other telecommunications companies to lower their prices as well, because we know it's by increasing competition that we can lower prices. And that's exactly what we did for Canadians today. With increased prices, Canadians are turning to this government to make their lives more affordable. But the Liberals are abandoning families over and over. They've approved a merger between Rogers and Shaw, which means Canadians are going to pay more for cell phone and internet. And we already pay among the highest prices in the world. Liberals are letting businesses get rich on the backs of Canadian families. Why did the government abandon Canadians this way?
The
Honourable Minister of Innovation. Madam Speaker, I thank my colleague for his question, but I think he missed this morning's press conference. What we said this morning is that Canadians asked us for one thing, which was to lower prices for telecommunications in Canada. One way to do that is to have competition, and that means we need a national fourth player. Not only will we have a fourth player, we imposed 21 conditions with an unprecedented measures for Canadians. And this will lower prices in Canada. Thank you.
For Windsor West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I know the minister has said he's going to watch this deal, a Frankenstein deal, like a hawk, but he's left Canadian consumers to the buzzards. In fact, this minister has given the green light to Rogers and at the same time given the red light to his own industry committee and to the Competition Bureau that's been opposed to this. For decades, Liberal and Conservative governments have allowed these massive telco companies to make huge profits off the backs of hardworking Canadians. This is a disaster that will end with less competition, massive layoffs, and higher prices. Why have the Liberals thrown in the towel, sided with the telco CEOs, and are sticking Canadian families with higher prices and the bell?
The Honourable Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry.
Madam Speaker, I have enormous respect for my colleagues, but we gave the red light. We did not approve the transfer of license from Shaw to Rogers, Madam Speaker. That was very clear. What we did, instead we listened to Canadians. Something that everyone in this House should do. The Canadians have told us one thing: bring prices down, more competition, and the way to do that in Canada is to have a fourth national player, Madam Speaker. That's why we impose conditions, because we want lower prices for Canadians, and we'll be watching them like a hawk, Madam Speaker.